Hello, good morning everyone. Welcome to another lesson in Humanities and Social Sciences 004, the discipline and ideas in applied social sciences. In our former meeting, we had a discussion about the difference between social science and applied social science. We also discussed about the different branches of social science, namely economics, anthropology, political science, demography, geography, psychology, history, and sociology. Lastly, we also discussed about the fields considered under applied social sciences. These are counseling, social work, and communication studies. In our second module, or in our second discussion, we will identify the goals and scope of counseling, describe and understand roles, functions, and competencies of counselors, explain the principles of counseling, demonstrate understanding of counseling through profiling, and lastly, to identify the principles of counseling. So let me ask you something right now. What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word counseling? Counseling is a relationship characterized by the application of psychological theories and a recognized set of communication skills appropriate to a client's intimate concerns, problems, or aspirations, especially those who are demoralized, distressed, or in a negative state of mind about their situation or context. Given that, a counselor must be someone who has mastery in psychological theories and counseling techniques. Also, a counselor must also have a mastery in different branches of social science. Keep in mind that counseling techniques must be mastered because each client is unique and must be dealt with uniquely as well. Having a wide understanding about different counseling techniques would enable the counselor to deal with different types of clients. On the other note, counseling is both an art and science. When we talk about art, it is connected to the term creativity. Am I right? And in counseling, creativity is a must. Because counseling as an art is the objective dimension wherein it associates with compassion and giving oneself. And how would you give compassion and how would you offer help? Simply, you have to apply creativity. Alright? Counseling as a science is the objective dimension wherein it formulates observations and inferences. As a science, counseling follows patterns and systematic way of dealing with clients. If we're going to add art and science in the counseling process, we could achieve a high potential of solving the client's problem as well. So, a counselor must not just be a scientific person or someone who has wide background about different counseling techniques, but rather a person with compassion, empathy, a person with high self-esteem as well, and self-awareness. Because only by understanding yourself first and by helping yourself first, you would be able to help others. In counseling, we have this model called Boulder Model. It is also known as the Scientist Practitioner Model. It is an integration of the art and sciences in counseling which shapes guidelines that combine science and practice. Boulder Model believes that all actions of a counselor must be based on empirical findings, thus make him or her a scientist, an expert. Mastery of psychology is required to practice counseling. Counseling is deeply grounded on psychological knowledge. Boulder Model is both observed in informal and formal helping. What is the difference between the two? On the other note, informal helping happens when a person in distress asks for help and seeks a connection or attention from another person who will listen, who will allow him or her to speak, and who will not condemn and criticize him or her. Always remember that in counseling, Even if it is informal helping, you have to deal with it with complete confidentiality and objectivity. Always make sure that if someone shares something to you, you have to keep it to yourself and try to understand the person's point of view as well. Informal helping is the type of counseling that happens inside the counseling room or even outside the counseling room. While it is true that informal helping could also be done or based on psychological knowledge, but always remember that its application could also be applied by anyone. Going on, what can you say about this quotation? A counselor should accompany, listen, assist, and help a person to meet own goals. The counseling profession in the Philippines is based on Republic Act 9258, otherwise known as the Guidance and Counseling Act of 2004. The guidance and counseling profession applies an integrated approach to the development of a well-functioning individual through the provision of support that aids an individual to use his or her potentials to the fullest accord with his or her interests, needs, and abilities. Based on the American Counseling Association conference conducted on March 2010, counseling is a professional relationship that empowers diverse individuals, families, and groups to accomplish mental health, wellness, education, and career goals. This only shows that counseling is applicable to all facets of life. Counseling is the process of guiding a person during a stage of life when reassessments or decisions have to be made about one's life. To continue, before we proceed with the related fields in counseling, also remember that counseling also entails the responsibility of guiding people to make healthy choices. You also have to put in mind that even though we are here to help, there are times that counseling might not be effective, especially to those who don't want to be helped. We cannot really help those people who don't want to be helped or who are not asking for it. To continue, these are the related fields in counseling, namely psychometrics and psychiatry. Psychometric is a branch of psychology that deals with designing, administrating, and interpreting the quantitative tests for the measurement of psychological variables such as intelligence, aptitude, interest, and personality traits. So if you're applying for a college program in a particular school, more likely you will encounter a psychometrician because they are the one assigned in interpreting and assessing your capability as an individual. Psychiatry, on the other hand, is a branch of general medicine that deals with the treatment of mentally ill by trained professionals using clinical intervention including drugs, surgical procedures, and non-physical approaches. We're going to ask ourselves, are guidance counselors allowed to prescribe antidepressant drugs? It is actually wrong, right? Because the job to prescribe drugs or any form of drug that would aid the mental illnesses or mental incapability of individuals are not a job for a guidance counselor, but rather a job for a psychiatrist. What are the factors affecting counseling? Based on this quotation, counseling is affected by the context and the surrounding factors, which includes peers, culture, neighborhood, and the counseling process. So counseling as a profession, you have to remember that the client itself is affected by several factors as well. Such thing is called as the context. Always remember that context of counselings are important as well. You have to familiarize yourself with this because there are several factors affecting a client, especially the peers, the neighborhood, the culture, and the counseling as it is. When you talk about the peers as a context, you have to remember that the friends of the client have something to do with the attitude of the client himself or herself. Friends' attitude, norms, and behaviors have a strong influence on the adolescents, especially kapag ang client natin ay nasa adolescent period or stage of life. It is not limited to the adolescent period, but always remember that the people that are around the client has something to do with the client's well-being. So you have to understand the peers as well. At the same time, the neighborhood itself or the environment or the community where the client is in or belongs to. You have to check as well the interaction between the immediate family and the community around the client. Third on our list, we have culture as context. Culture is as important as ABC in counseling because before you proceed with the counseling process, you must make sure that you familiarize yourself with the culture of the client. The norms, the values, the belief system of the client are important in understanding the whole or the entirety of the client we are facing. Counseling as a context, on the other hand, talks about the client factors, the counselor factors, the contextual factors, and the process factors that are contributors in the success of the counseling process. So what are these factors? These factors, we have here client factors. Always remember that the physiological state of the client is important as well. Halimbawa, class, habang ikaw ay nagka-counsel, kapag ang client mo ay naiihi, nadudumi, nagugutom, kailangan mo munang i-address ang mga bagay na yon dahil hindi makakapag-focus ang client mo dun sa counseling process. So, napakahalaga ng client factor. Always remember that the client should be in the perfect condition before you proceed with the counseling process itself. Same goes with you as a counselor. As a counselor, you have to make sure that you have the personality, the skills, and the qualities of a good counselor. And at the same time, you have to deal as well with your basic needs first so that you can really deliver what you are supposed to deliver. When we talk about contextual factors, these are the environment and atmosphere of the counseling room. It must be a place wherein the client would be comfortable to share his or her story, and at the same time, that the confidentiality of what you're going to talk about inside that counseling room will stay on that counseling room. In some cases, in the Philippines or even outside the country, the counseling room must be soundproof, and at the same time, it must be an accepting vibe on it. Kumbaga, meron tayong halaman dyan, meron tayong couch dyan, at always remember yung importance ng couch, ng sofa sa isang counseling room. Usually, during the counseling, dapat meron tayong sofa or couch kasi dyan natin pinapaupo yung client natin. Because yung client natin, dapat ma-feel niya yung comfort and at the same time, wala tayong binibigay na instruction kung paano siya mauupo. So, meaning to say, kung gusto niyang humiga, pwede siyang humiga. Kung gusto niyang umupo, pwede siyang umupo. So, aside from that, naglalagay din tayo ng halaman sa counseling room para maramdaman ng client yung pagiging natural lang ng environment at it will also encourage yung pagiging open ng client natin. At the same time, halimbawa class, yung tissue paper, we don't offer it. Pero dapat meron tayo niyan sa table. Okay? At ang client natin ang mag-i-initiate kung gusto niya ng tissue or kung gusto niyang gamitin yung tissue na available sa table. Bakit hindi natin siya ino-offer? Kasi kapag in-offer mo yung tissue, nangangahulugan yon na maaring i-perceive yun na pinapahinto mo na siya sa pag-iyak. Tatandaan class na ang counseling must be accepting. It must be a room for the client to feel comfortable, and it must be a room for him or her to share what he or she wants to share. Another factor affecting counseling or the success of counseling would be the process. Always remember that counseling is an art, but at the same time, it is a science. So you have to follow this process. First, develop the trust, explore the problem, and then you have to set goals and empower action and maintain change. Okay? So hindi ka pwedeng tumalon ka agad sa problema. Kailangan muna mabuild mo muna yung relationship, and mostly dapat ang relationship natin ay client-counselor relationship. Okay? So it is a professional relationship. So I hope that you were able to develop a particular knowledge about counseling, having said or having discussed some of the factors affecting the success of a counseling. Next on our list or next on our discussion would be the goals of counseling. The goal of counseling is to help individual or people to utilize their prevailing social skills and also to utilize their problem-solving skills more functionally or to cultivate new surviving and coping skills. It is important to keep in mind that our goal in counseling is to produce self-directed individuals who are capable of solve or coming up with their own solution to their problem. According to Marian Mitchell and Robert L. Gibson, these are the goals of counseling. First, we have developmental goals. Students, always remember that our goal here in counseling is that to come up with solution to the prevailing problems and issues in a particular stage of life. Kung nandito sa particular stage of life ang client natin, tinutulungan natin siya na magkaroon ng skills para masolusyonan yung challenges niya doon sa particular stage of life na yon. That is why it is called as developmental goal. On the other hand, preventive goal meaning to say, instead of solving the problem or acting up kapag nandun na yung problema, why not avail or why not offer the counseling services para hindi na dumating yung mismong problema. So we are rather preventive rather than curative. Okay? So bago pa man dumating ang problema, ino-offer na natin yung counseling para hindi na dumating yung problema. So this will help the client to avoid undesired outcomes. Third on our list is that enhancement goals, meaning to say we are here to help the client develop skills and abilities so that the client would be able to cope up with any life situation. Fourth on our list, it is also our goal to do remedial. What do we mean by remedial? Meaning to say, it is important to update, to recheck, to remonitor our client. Okay? Parang sa klase, kapag may remedial tayo, tinatry nating balikan. Okay? Para i-check natin kung naging successful ba yung process na ginawa natin. Fifth on our list, another goal in counseling is exploratory. Meaning to say, you are not limited by whatever you know already. You can experiment. You can examine options, test skills, try new and different activities. To continue, we have reinforcement goals. This goal will help client recognize that what they are doing, thinking, and feeling is fine. Meaning to say, here we are recognizing the emotion of the client. It is important to let them feel what they want to feel. Okay? Hindi pwede na i-invalidate natin yung nararamdaman ng client. Kung ang client ay nasasaktan sa simpleng bagay lang, hayaan mo silang masaktan. Hindi mo, kung iba ang pananaw mo dun sa nangyari, hindi yun nangangahulugan na magbe-base ka sa kung anong alam mo. Halimbawa, class, kung ang client mo ay nagmumukmuk dahil nawalan siya ng 20 pesos, pero para sa'yo, 20 pesos lang yan, bakit ka nagbumukmuk? It is not in any way an opportunity for you to belittle the emotion of the client dahil iba-iba tayo ng take sa iba't ibang problema sa buhay. Nagkakaintindihan. Next on our list, cognitive goals. One of our goal is to develop the thinking skills of our client to make sure that they will attain knowledge, to make sure na may makukuha silang mga cognitive skills on the process of counseling. Susunod, physiological goals. Always remember that as counselors or guidance counselors, it is also our goal or our duty to promote healthy lifestyle. Okay? The body is as important as the mind itself, and that is one thing that you have to keep in mind. Also, promote healthy lifestyle simply because kapag healthy ang katawan, healthy din ang isipan. I-promote natin yung exercise and balanced diet. Ayan ay maa-achieve natin sa under the physiological goals. When we talk about psychological goals, on the other hand, aids in the developing good social interaction skills, learning emotional control, and developing positive self-concept. Self-concept, when we talk about that, we have to develop the concept of the self, or meaning to say how the client view himself or herself. Okay, kung paano niya titignan ang sarili niya. Ayan ay ang sumasagot sa tanong na who am I? Kapag maganda ang tingin mo sa sarili mo, that would help you to come up with solution with your problems, and at the same time, that would help you to live your life in a good manner or in a good way. So, mahalaga ba ang self-concept? Definitely. Okay? Kasi kung ano ang paniniwala mo tungkol sa sarili mo would determine your actions or choices in life. Counseling aims to empower the client by helping the individual make critical decisions in life, develop an ability to cope, and enhance effectiveness and improve the quality of life. So what do we mean by that statement? Okay, we will know further on the next slide. The goal of counseling, according to MacLeod in his book An Introduction to Counseling, are insight, relating with others, self-awareness, self-acceptance, and self-actualization. Ang client, dapat makadevelop siya ng insight, meaning to say, maintindihan niya kung saan nagmumula ang kanyang mga problema, maintindihan niya kung ano ang pinag-uugatan ng lahat ng mga troubles in his or her life. Pangalawa, dapat ang client natin makadevelop ng skill to relate with other people, ma-maintain yung satisfaction with the relationship he or she has in the community. So, napakahalaga ng relating to others simply because if we are connected to people in our environment, then definitely we are not alone and we will feel like we are not alone, and there are people who will help us to cope up with the pressing issues and concerns in our lives. Pangatlo, goal din natin na ang client ay makadevelop ng self-awareness, meaning to say, maintindihan niya that he or she is a unique individual and experiencing things that are unique. Diba? Self-awareness is the idea that you are different from other people, and it is important to let the client know about this para maintindihan niya na kung ako ay unique at ang experience ko ay unique, then definitely I can come up with unique ways as well to solve my problems. And it will also encourage the client na kung ano man ang decision niya ay okay lang yun dahil siya ay unique. Okay? At kung ano man ang estado niya sa buhay ay okay lang din sapagkat wala naman siyang ibang pagkukumparahan kung hindi ang sarili niya dapat. Okay, pang-apat, dapat din magkaroon ang client ng self-acceptance. Kasi kung hindi niya tatanggapin ang sarili niya, mahihirapan ng iba na tanggapin siya. Okay? Development of a positive attitude towards oneself. Napakahalaga niyan dahil happiness or success in counseling will always start from within. Lastly, self-actualization. We encourage the client to fulfill the potential he or she has. Okay? Next is enlightenment. Dapat maliwanagan ng client. Dapat kung kaya nating isingit dito ang spiritual awakening, then so be it. Depending on the scenario, but there are times that spiritual awakening could help or could do so much in the counseling process. Problem solving is important as well. We develop skills or let the client develop skills in problem solving, psychological education, understanding the body, the mechanism of the body, the mechanism of the mind and the brain, and they have to acquire techniques to understand and control behavior. Acquisition of social skills. No man is an island. It is important to develop social skills, interpersonal skills. And cognitive change, meaning to say, dapat may modification of irrational beliefs. We have to debunk the irrational belief system in the mind. We have to debunk the misconception in the mind and the toxic culture or toxic mentality of the client. So, binabago natin yung kanyang pananaw. Aside from dealing with the cognitive state of the client, it is also important to deal with the behavioral changes or to promote behavioral changes in the client's lives. Meaning to say, here we are promoting self-directed behaviors and at the same time self-promoting behaviors and self-healing tendencies or capabilities of the client and avoid self-destructive behaviors. Next on our list is that systematic change is being promoted as well. What do we mean by systematic change? It means to say that we have to narrate or we have to tell the clients that they are part of the system. Then definitely if they are part of the system, they can change the system as well. And that would be achieved by empowering the client. When we empower the client, we tell them that they have this self-efficiency or self-efficacy wherein they are able to succeed, they are able to come up with solution to their own problem. Next on our list is restitution. To make amends for previous destructive behavior and to forgive oneself. We have to make sure that the client would be able to recognize that the decisions he or she conducted in his or her life in the past is not holding him anymore. Meaning to say, it is already in the past. So he or she could forgive himself already. Okay? Generativity, on the other hand, we also tell the clients that the current situation they are in right now is not final yet, and they have the ability to change that. Given these goals from Gibson, Mitchell, and McLeod, we can assume that the main goal of counseling is client empowerment. Client empowerment is the development of skills and abilities that require self-management and improve motivation towards actions that are good for oneself and develop a positive outlook toward the past. The understanding of the past will lead to some sense of closure and attainment of relative inner and outer harmony, resulting to improvement in relationships with family, friends, colleagues, and others. Counseling is used to make clients independent and functioning individuals. Let us now proceed with the scope of counseling. We can all agree that counseling is necessary in almost every aspect of a person's life: cognitive, behavioral, systemic, social, and psychological aspect of their lives. Counseling as a profession is applicable to different scope, may it be in individual approach or even in group approach. Halimbawa, sa individual counseling, ang mga topic na dinidil natin dito ay mga topic related to depression, sexual abuse, anxiety, gender relationships, spirituality, ideology, adolescent issues, and so much more. Dito, kung mapapansin mo, ang mga topic ay very much personal at hindi kayang pag-usapan in a group setting dahil ito ay mga sensitive topics, and at the same time, it requires very high amount of confidentiality. On the other hand, when we talk about another scope which is called family counseling, the concerns here are related to family such as divorce, remarriage, and others. When we talk about marital and premarital counseling naman, ito naman ay kinakonduct natin sa mga mag-asawa o magiging mag-asawa. So it could be after the marriage, before the marriage, and sometimes meron din during the marriage, but very rare yun. Prior to weddings, nakikipag-usap tayo, nagka-counsel tayo, pwede rin yung family planning, that is an example under the marital and premarital counseling. When we talk about community counseling, we go to the community. We go to a particular group of people, and the concern is very light or somehow the same sa mga taong kabilang dun sa grupo na yon. Hindi siya very individualized ang approach, but rather they are experiencing the same thing. That's why they are being grouped together. So the core values and ethical principles. Core values serve as standards that shape the members' behavior in their interaction with other people. So yung pinaka-pinag-uugatan ng lahat ng action nila ay yung core values nila o yung pinanghahawakan nilang belief system. These are the core values of counseling. First one, respect for human dignity. It is important to understand that even though clients are problematic or even though the clients have problematic way of solving problems, remember that they are human too and they are required to be respected as well because they have dignity. Kumbaga tao sila na may nararamdaman at may pakiramdam. That is why you have to treat them with compassion, non-judgmental attitude, and empathy. Okay? Partnership. Remember that the success of counseling is based on the partnership or collaboration between the client and the counselee. Third on our list, dito naman sa autonomy, dinidiscuss natin yung kahalagahan ng keeping the story confidential or whatever happened inside the counseling room will remain or stay inside the counseling room. Always remember that the clients should see the counseling room or the counseling process itself as a safe environment that is a room or considered as a room for him. Next on our list, we have personal integrity, wherein you have to treat the client with integrity, reflecting honesty and truthfulness. At the same time, social justice, we accept and respect the diversity of clients. Hindi natin sila pinuput into box. Sila ay naiintindihan natin at sila ay tinitignan natin uniquely because all of us are unique. Responsible caring. Hindi tayo lumalagpas sa kung ano lang yung itinatakda ng ating trabaho, dahil tatandaan class na dapat ang relationship natin ay professional or counselor-client relationship dapat. Hindi pwedeng lumagpas ka doon. Okay? Pwede ka maging kaibigan, pero always remember na may limitasyon. It is essential that counselors comprehend the values of their clients in order to accompany them appropriately. So, ibig sabihin, maintindihan mo kung ano yung pinagdadaanan ng client, dahil kapag naintindihan mo yan, makakapag-create ka ng ways on how to help him or her. So, as we close, these are the principles of counseling. We give advice, we provide reassurance, we help them release the emotional tension. We help them clear their mind and organize their thoughts. And we are reorienting them or telling them what they are trying to say. Isa-isahin natin yan. Advice. Nabanggit ko sa inyo na minsan okay din mag-advise pero minsan hindi. Okay? Kaya nga ang partner niyan, di ba? Guidance and counseling. In guidance, you can give advice. In counseling, more on dapat ikaw ay nakikinig. So, advice, tatansyahin mo kung kailan mo siya ibibigay. Reassurance naman, dapat lagi mong pinapaulit-ulit na, sige, mag-share ka lang, ano lang yan, hindi lalabas yan. You reassure them. You give them the confidence that you will give their story. Pangatlo, hayaan mo silang mag-release ng emotion. Pang-apat, clarified thinking. Kapag nagkukwento ang client class, na-organize yung thoughts nila. Okay? Kasi the more you talk about your pain, the more you talk about your story, lumalabas siya in a way na na-organize mo siya habang sinasabi mo siya. And ayun yung magagamit mo dun sa reorientation. So, lagi tayong may clarification. So, you mean to say, ganito yung sinasabi mo? Okay, that is reorientation taking place. Listening skills, mahalaga din yan. You have to listen empathically, meaning to say, you're not just there listening passively but rather actively. Respect them, you produce empathy and positive regard, you clarify, you confront and interpret. Ano naman tong confrontation? Minsan, kapag may napansin kang mali sa sinasabi ng client, pwede mo na siyang bigyan ng immediate feedback. And then, avoid transference and counter-transference. Ano naman to? Pag sinabi nating transference, minsan, ang client natin, tinitignan tayo hindi as a counselor, but rather someone he or she knows. Kunyari, kung ang trato niya na sa'yo ay tatay niya, mali na yun. Okay, so be careful with the transference. Yung counter-transference naman, ikaw bilang client, kung ang trato mo sa, ikaw bilang counselor, kung ang trato mo sa tao ay, iba na, hindi na counselee or client, then definitely that is wrong already. So be careful with transference and counter-transference. Ethical principles of counseling: autonomy of individuals, principle of non-maleficence, principle of justice, and principle of fidelity. When we say autonomy of individuals, based on the right to freedom of action and freedom of choice. Principle of non-maleficence refers to the instruction that all healers must above all do no harm. So parang lang tayo, medical professional as well, na hindi tayo magkukos ng any harm sa client. Pangatlo, principle of justice, concerned with the fair distribution of resources and services. Meaning to say, as much as we can, it is ethical na we provide access to counseling to all. It is non-discriminative. Pang-apat, principle of fidelity, presence of loyalty, reliability, and good faith, as well as the rule of confidentiality. So you already know. General moral theories based from the British Association for Counseling and Psychotherapy. A good counselor must develop empathy, sincerity, integrity, resilience, respect, humility, competence, fairness, wisdom, and courage. Empathy, you put yourself on the shoes of the other. You perceive a particular situation the way they see it. Sincerity, you have to be true to your emotions. You have to be true with the relationship that you are building. Integrity, you do the right thing even no one is looking. Meaning to say, you practice complete integrity in your profession, meaning to say you give what you are supposed to give. Resilience, as a counselor, you have to be resilient. There are times na mapapagod ka, pero always keep in mind that your goal is to help or do so much in the society. Respect, you give respect. You have to be humble. If you don't know the answer, if you cannot help the client, then refer the client. Okay? Madaming pagkakataon sa counseling profession na kapag hindi natin kayang tulungan ng client, nire-refer natin sila. Competence, you have to develop competency. You have to develop yourself all the time. You have to make sure that you are aware of new techniques and ways on how to make counseling better. Fairness, you treat them with fairness. You have to be wise. You have to be backed up by wide understanding of several theories from social sciences. At the same time, you have to be courageous. Meaning to say, you have to make sure and keep in mind that you can surpass everything. You can help a client no matter what. So those are the good characteristic of a good counselor. Knowing the information provided, do you think you will be a good counselor if given a chance? I hope that you will do so. That ends our discussion. Always remember that counseling is an important profession. It is a rising profession, and it is something that you could venture into. And at the same time, they can do so much in this world because counseling is preventive rather than curative. Magagamit natin ang counseling bago pa man dumating ang mga problema. Okay? So do not be scared of counseling, and I hope that you develop as well the heart to take part in this profession. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day. God bless you.
Happy learning at home with lessons made easy by Olivarian GoTeach. One proud Olivarian.